Welcome to the Memory Health Made Easy podcast. I'm your host, Dave Norris, and this is episode 19. In today's episode, a rockstar reveals the 11 tips to being sharp for life. So, rockstar tips for a rockstar life. Well, that's the promise anyway. This show is especially for folk that are just wanting to dive in, get a bit of a grip on how they could start to apply the principles of memory health for life. And in today's show, and using the background of a rock star's lifestyle, we get to explore in a fun way how simple things can really add up over time. This is Rockstar plus science gives us memory health for life, to stay sharp for life. If this is the first time that you've joined the show, please subscribe. If you've enjoyed further conversations that I've had with guests or the ones that I've done just me on the mic, I would appreciate a review, and especially a 5-star review if you think I'm up for it. Today's show is brought to you by the Memory Health Academy. It's where you can learn how to get memory health fast. Our memory health checkup and other programs like our coaching program is also available in the Memory Health Academy. If you're interested in finding out more about those resources and those programs, go to memoryhealthmadeeasy.com/products. Now let's get into today's show. G'day, this is David Norris, and this is the Memory Health Made Easy podcast, brought to you by memoryhealthmadeeasy.com. Easy to remember, isn't it? Before we get into today's show, I thought we'd kick things off with a little game of Who Am I? Are you ready? Let's get into it. Who am I? I am a musical rock legend. I've been in the game for almost 6 decades. My band has had some of the greatest hits of all time and been at the top of the charts in all decades since we started performing. I'm from England. I am the frontman of my band. I am sometimes known as Mr. Hips and Lips. Who am I? I am Mick Jagger. And Mick Jagger has been a person that's fascinated me for some time as an enigma of health and vitality of somebody moving into their 7th and approaching their 8th decade of life. Today's show, I wanted to explore Mick Jagger's regime and dissect it and look at how the things that he is doing is aligned with supporting his cognitive health, his sense of endurance, his physical capacity to do what he does and loves to do. His health and vitality has formed articles, stories, and deep dive journal investigations like the shows of 60 Minutes. But it all came undone for Mick Jagger in March of 2019, just before the Rolling Stones were about to undergo their stadium tour of America and Canada. In a routine medical exam, it was found that Mick Jagger had a leaky heart valve, one so much that stopped the tour. He underwent surgery, and within as little as 6 weeks, he posted a remarkable video online showing him performing and training for the upcoming and to be rescheduled show. He was certainly back at it, and back at it meaning that he was into his high-intensity cardio work, movement, balance exercises that were really getting him in shape for his tour. But this isn't new for Mick Jagger. He's been at it and applying himself at his craft for many years. He applied the same spirit and intensity in his recovery from heart surgery as he did for training in applying himself for a stadium event. His high-intensity workouts are notable, and I wanted to unpack the lifestyle of Mick Jagger and have a look under the hood on what he's doing and what we can learn about maintaining our health and endurance, our physical fitness, our cognitive fitness for life. This is especially important for us if we're thinking about our game at work or we're wanting to stay sharp for life and into traditional retirement years. So let me throw out some facts here. Mick Jagger, at the age of 75, is clocking up around 12 miles or 19 kilometres worth of steps and jigs and hip swiggles on stage in every gig. This is happening on top of also clocking up around 12 kilometres per run that he does when he's not doing a show. Now the risk is, and the trap that we could fall into is that, hey, that sounds wonderful for Mick Jagger. Look at all the cash, look at all the opportunity, look at all the resources he has around him to do that. No, this is looking at a person who's made a choice about doing the hard work to get the results that he wants. And it goes right back as far as his father, Basil, he himself a physical education teacher living to the ripe age of 93, coached Mick from an early age in the fundamentals of achieving and sustaining physical strength and endurance for life. He certainly lost his way, and he has been famed for some of his antics in the 60s and 70s, from alcoholism and drug use, all manner of abuse that one could apply to their brain and body. I guess in some ways his father was very much the starter's gun on his journey, and he has diversified, amplified, and I guess adjusted to his own personal makeup the ingredients that work for him. So I thought today's show will unpack 11 tips we can learn from Mick Jagger about how you can stay sharp for life. And it is not about becoming a rock star. It is not about jumping off speaker sets. It's not about how to swing your guitar to smash it into 10,000 pieces or to light the stage on fire and do a tummy slide through it. No, this is not what the show is about today. No, today's show is about getting satisfaction, because you can get it. And if you start me up, I will never stop. No, look, I'm sorry for the bad Rolling Stone puns already that are flying, but it's just too easy. So let's get into those 11 tips we can learn from Mick Jagger on how to stay sharp for life. Number 1, start early. It was clear that with Mick Jagger, he had some instrumental advice from his father from a young age around the role and importance of maintaining your physical health. That went a little bit pear-shaped, obviously, in his younger career days, but he did make a bit of a pivot in his midlife to prioritise his physical well-being. If you've been listening to the show in previous episodes, no doubt you would have an appreciation around the role of physical exercise and its associated benefits in preventing cognitive decline as we get older. In an interesting study where they looked at push-ups as an indicator for early mortality or early death, they looked at men of around about the age of 40 years of age. So they were actively engaged in the workforce. They had over 1,000 blokes who were occupationally, fit. And they looked at the association between push-up capacity and the incidence of cardiovascular disease across a 10-year follow-up interval. So it was across time of which they followed these guys. So the magic number here associated with the risk of a cardiovascular event, so a heart disease or anything to do with our blood supply to our brain or heart, those people that could complete less than 10 push-ups, so they were unable to make 10, had a remarkably higher risk of experiencing a cardiovascular event, a heart attack, a stroke, or anything else to do with our cardiovascular system. They're a much greater risk of experiencing this. And what does that tell us? Well, it shows us the potential positive and strong relationship between strength and cardiovascular fitness and our health and well-being over time. So if we're taking the lesson from Mick Jagger here, start early, and if not, kick it into gear throughout our midlife years. What's midlife? Well, it's anywhere between our 40s and our late 50s. Number 2, be consistent. Mick Jagger has a pen chart for being regular as clockwork with doing the activities to support his ability to turn up and do these live stadium events. The Rolling Stones have been touring for years and they continue to tour. And it is only through a continual regime of consistently performing and doing the activity, the hard work around food, movement, balance, meditation, etc. are the things that he's being metronomic with on a daily basis. 3, it is super clear that Mick Jagger is focused, laser focused on why he was doing this hard intensity type activities and choosing the lifestyle strategies that he does, because he's looking at his big why. He wants to continue to turn up. He wants to continue to perform. He wants to do the activities that really matter, that are purposeful to him. For him to turn up and perform on a live stage, for him to be present at interviews, for him to be there with his massive handful of children he's got to have the energy and wherewithal to be able to do it. That sounds to me like he's got his focus on a goal. What would the future have involved if Mick did not have that checkup? And so that takes me to point number 4, getting a checkup. Have you had a checkup of where you stand with regards to your cardiovascular fitness? When was the last time you spoke to your local doctor about this? And in previous episode, where I discussed the role and value of having a memory health checkup. Know your risks, know where you stand, and take action against them. And that's exactly what Mick did. He had a routine medical checkup. They identified that he had a leaky heart valve, and they obviously intervened, and then he had to be quite proactive in getting back on the horse, so to speak, around those things that were, I guess he'd had a history of learning about how his body adapted and getting the right team and advice around him to support his recovery as well. Number 5. Mick has been known to work out for up to 3 hours, 6 days a week. 3 hours, 6 days a week. Well, I put it to you, you don't need to be doing 3 hours, 6 days a week, but it certainly matches up with what he wants to achieve. He wants to be able to perform on stage for 120 plus minutes at a high intensity level where he is covering up to 19 kilometers or 12 miles at a time. He's putting in the work to help match that particular goal. So again, it comes back to what are your goals? What do you want to achieve? And then doing the hard work for it. When it comes to our memory health, we can use as a baseline measure of getting our 150 minutes per week. I would argue that is not sufficient. However, if you're starting out and haven't moved and haven't performed any cardiovascular exercises for some time, then it may be worthwhile starting at a point of, well, let's get 30 minutes up. Let's get 45, let's get 50 and build it over time. What's key is that Mick has certainly invested time and energy to build his cardio capacity. Of course, he's certainly refined the information he's accessed, no doubt. He's relying on personal trainer support here. In fact, his latest personal trainer support is a Norwegian personal trainer whose clients include Olympic athletes and soccer players. Now, you don't need to reach that level of skill to access the right information, but it might be worthwhile building a team around you to advise you on good exercise strategies for where you're at and what you want to achieve. Wow, a lot of stuff in this episode. Be right back into it. I want to share with you a little bit about memoryhealthmadeeasy.com and what you can find over there. Programs, resources, and community, all with one goal: to help stop avoidable memory loss. Here's a great place to start. The Memory Health Checkup shows you how to identify your personal risks and also set a map and course about what to do about them. The Memory Health Fast Masterclass gets you out of the gates quickly around applying the 9 principles for memory health for life. Want to work out your brain? Improve your brain performance with How to Train Your Brain. It's a 30-day brain optimizing program. And of course, we've got our flagship community, which is all about support, and you can ask me any question where I'm your memory health coach to guide, support, and cheer you through the steps to achieve memory health. Come on over to memoryhealthmadeeasy.com/products where you can find out more. Now let's get back to today's episode. Number 6, it's not just physical fitness that Mick has been focusing on. Under the suggestion of his guitarist Ronnie Wood's ex-wife and clean beauty entrepreneur Joe Wood, he's made some key changes to his diet. He's made a choice around eating organic whole foods. Whole foods, if we go back to our conversation with Dr. Amy Lockman in earlier episodes, episode 5, I believe, where we talked about what are whole foods. Whole foods are those things that are right next to the natural source. They're something that falls from a tree or grows in a pasture, for example, or raised in a pasture. In Mick's particular scenario, he's made choices around eating organic. Why? The Environmental Working Group published a fairly stark picture of the environmental toxins that are in our food supply, one of which that comes to mind is organophosphates. Organophosphates are a nerve-acting agent. They are clearly neurotoxic for insects, of which is their primary use, is a pesticide. But also there has been a strong correlation and observation around the impact on humans as well. Those occupations that are a particular high risk are those that are farmers. Farmers who've shown a high level exposures to organophosphates have an increased risk for cardiovascular disease and cancer. Prolonged exposure to organophosphates has been shown to impair memory and concentration, be associated with disorientation, severe depression, irritability, confusion, headache, to name a few. It is clear it has an impact on your brain's performance. In 2012, a systematic review of the literature was carried out by researchers at the University of College London. Scientists found that a low level of exposure to organophosphates produces a long-lasting decline in neurological and cognitive function. So regardless of whether it's a high or low exposure, low-level exposures are showing to have an impact on your brain's performance. The cognitive skills to be affected at a greater degree were memory formation and information processing speed compared to other cognitive functions such as language. And this kind of makes sense, particularly on how this pesticide or organic agent interacts with our body. It affects some of those chemicals associated with memory formation. Choosing organic is one way you can try and reduce your risk to environmental contagions that are in our food supply. That may sound all doom and gloom, but there is a positive picture and spin to the organic food debate, one of which that was recently published around leaves. Those plants that leaves were attacked by pests had an increase in the number of the phytochemicals, the things that make fruit and vegetable colourful, therefore packing it full of those nutrients associated with, you guessed it, better brain health, better cognitive fitness. Mick appears to be eating a primarily fruit, vegetable, legumes, lean protein and whole grain type of diet. And if you've listened to the show, and particularly the conversation I had with Dr. Amy and also with Stephen C. Anderson, we spoke about the role of having rich, nutritious, nutrient-dense food and the impact that it has to our tummy biome and also our brain health. From what Mick's reported to eat, sounds like it's very much a blueprint for the Mediterranean or the Mind style of diet. Number 7, when there's a gap in one's diet, Mick is certainly making some choices about supplementing and taking suitable vitamins. He's been reported nowadays to take drugs of choice, so to speak, of vitamins A, C, D, E, along with a B complex and cod liver oil and ginseng. These are associated with and have been reported to assist with endurance and also cognitive functions. There's no doubt a wide debate around the role of nutrient supplements, but for the average person, for the standard diet, there is an extreme gap in what folk are eating and what their micronutrient needs are, and their macronutrients being those proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. When I asked Professor Mick Jagger around her opinion on the debates between what people are having, the carb diet, the protein diet, this diet, she came out quite clearly and said, Dave, people just need to eat beautiful, rich, nutrient-dense food. And to extend this point, when there is a gap around nutrient-dense food, we may need supplemental support. Talking to a dietitian or nutritionist around the right ones for you may be a great place to start. Tip number 8, raise your heart rate. Get into a bit of effort. In an earlier episode, I spoke with Matt Rutley of Stage 6, where we talked about the value of movement diversity. It is clear that Mick Jagger has a rich movement buffet. And when it comes to those things pushing his cardio button, he enjoys things like kickboxing, cycling, and of course, as I've mentioned, he's an avid runner, covering many, many miles at a time. Number 9, continuing this movement diversity theme, he's doing things to challenge not only his heart, but also his balance. He's incorporating activities that challenge his vestibular system, which is that part of our inner ear. It's challenging his vision, which is getting a sense of what's up and down. He's challenging his awareness of his joints in space. And he does this through activities like yoga, ballet, and you guessed it, hip shaking, wiggling, and dancing. What's starting to be uncovered around things that move our heart can impact our brain is that diversity does appear to matter, and dancing is one of those ones which appears to have a growing literature base around the strength of association between dancing and being brain health positive, or reducing your risk for cognitive decline, or simply helping prevent dementia. It's one of those tools in the toolbox that appears to be strongly associated with having lasting benefits to our cognitive fitness across our life. When I dissect dancing as an occupational therapist, I look at the diversity of what is actually happening in that particular task. There are cognitive challenges happening about remembering where I am to the beat of the music. I'm having to understand my body in space and moving myself with my partner. I'm doing something socially where I'm being challenged potentially by the group or in an individual context one-on-one with my partner. There's a whole lot of stuff happening around balance, for example. I'm coordinating my body. I'm developing what we would call a motor plan and executing it and getting feedback about what's happening. There's a whole rich diversity of information that's coming back into our brain, and it's challenging it. And we know from previous conversations that challenging our noggin, challenging our brain, is key to ensuring that sort of rich and robustness, putting things into the bank account, so to speak, as I've mentioned before. Number 10. Mick has certainly done away with other drugs of choice to help relax and chill out. These days, he's choosing things of quiet contemplation. He's finding me time. He's finding meditation time. He practices yoga regularly. Yoga also ticks a few boxes across many other areas that we've mentioned earlier around Mick's particular regime. But in this instance, how do we de-stress? How do we find calm? How do we find appreciation? How do we find positive emotions associated with things like gratitude, rather than being in a state which is one of flight, anxiety, worry, concern, anger? Our emotional responsiveness is not where we want to be. These are things that are practiced through a mindfulness-based exercise program, or working potentially, if you've got some big, heavy things to move through emotionally, working one-on-one with a psychologist that perhaps skilled in CBT or ACT, CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy. And rounding out our list, courtesy of Mick Jagger's health regime on how to stay sharp for life, is cutting back on the grog, cutting back on alcohol consumption. No doubt Mick Jagger and Keith Richards were the poster childs for partying hard in their day through the 60s and 70s, and probably somewhat in the 80s. He's now been quoted in saying that it's far too debilitating to drink. He does have a bit of a weak point for a Guinness or two, but he's certainly aware of that impact, and he does treat himself wisely rather than over-consuming it as a treat that's happening regularly. So there you have it. There are our 11 tips courtesy of Mick Jagger on how to stay sharp for life. I hope you've enjoyed today's show. I know I've had a blast putting it together and actually going through some Rolling Stones quotables, but I hope you've taken a bit out of today's show to appreciate that there is a lovely framework we can start putting together. You don't need Rockstar resources. You don't need to be a rock star yourself in order to pull this off. It starts with a commitment to making things better, putting a little bit of effort against one of these things. And that's perhaps the takeaway point here, is start with one in mind rather than try and do all 11 things. If you've enjoyed today's show, I would greatly appreciate a 5-star review if you think it's worthy over at Apple iTunes on the podcast platform. That would be greatly appreciated. It helps me serve more, reach more, and to create more memory health in folk. Of course, if you want to share it with friends or colleagues, please do so, maybe via social media. And one way that I've encouraged people to do it is take a screenshot or make a quick note about what is the things that you've learned today around the 11 tips from Mick Jagger's health regime to stay sharp for life. Sharing it's one way to help us, but it's also helping you learn and reinforce what you've learned and perhaps moving you closer to some action. I've mentioned a number of papers today, further episodes that we've had conversations with fantastic guests where we've dug deeper on those subject areas. If that's been of interest to you, come on over to memoryhealthmadeeasy.com/podcast, where you can find today's episode and show notes as well. Thank you very much for listening. I'm super grateful for you being here. I'm super grateful for you turning up to be here as well. Without you, I wouldn't be doing this. I had a wonderful conversation the other day, just to share, around, I was sharing some memory health tips with a teacher, and she ended up passing that on to her class of year 10 students, where, as she said to me, Dave, these girls are working so hard that they are going away at home, putting out 4 hours of homework a night, and they are getting nothing done. It's breaking them. This is no good for them, and I'm trying to put in a wellness program. I've taken what you've told me, and I've shared that with my students, and they've said it's been the best class so far this year, hands down. Thank you very much for that return feedback, because I love receiving that, and it really presses my buttons to hear how folk are taking this information and applying it in their lives and in their community. Again, I'm Dave Norris, and this is a Memory Health Made Easy podcast. Thank you very much for listening. A rocking lifestyle for a rocking brain and body for life. Well, that's what Mick Jagger shows us at the moment anyway. And I think we can take a little bit of inspiration, enjoy it as a fun exercise, to help drive home the point that lifestyle decisions do matter. Of course, Mick Jagger has got a checkered history of doing the things that weren't particularly pro-brain or body health early in his life, but he's certainly appearing to reap the rewards of the compounding benefits of continually turning up for himself on the daily actions, be it exercise, sleep, nutrition, calm mind, etc. No doubt it's a fun exercise, a fun case study, if you will, of examining lifestyle decisions and how that plays out on one's health and performance. I'm David Norris. This is the Memory Health Made Easy podcast. It's been a wonderful, fun exercise for me. If you've liked this type of format of the show, please leave a comment. Come on over to memoryhealthmadeeasy.com/podcast and dive into this episode. We'll have transcriptions and also relevant resources associated with today's podcast. Thank you very much, and I look forward to having a chat with you soon. Bye for now. If you really enjoyed today's conversation and have enjoyed other conversations on the podcast, Memory Health Made Easy, come on over. And I'm super excited to announce, ready, drum roll. That's right, I've got a Facebook group, Memory Health Warriors. A Memory Health Warrior is somebody who wants to turn up for themselves, their family, and their community, to have abundant energy and to play life fiercely so that we can have a beautiful brain for life, for memory health for life. The tribe's mission is simple. We're going to achieve 1 million beautiful brains, healthy, gorgeous brains, so that we can have memory health for life. And it's for folk who want to go a bit deeper with the content around the stuff that we go through here on this podcast. So join me over on Facebook at Memory Health Warriors. That's right, plural. And come and see what it's all about. Until next time, I'm your host, Dave Norris, and this is the Memory Health Made Easy podcast. Thanks for listening. The purpose of Memory Health Made Easy podcast is to educate and to inform. It is no substitute for professional care by a doctor or qualified professional. This podcast is provided on the understanding that it does not constitute medical or personal professional advice or services. Instead, we would encourage you to discuss your options with a healthcare provider who specializes in your particular needs.